So, welcome back to the Overnight Success Podcast. I'm really excited to kind of record this episode because this is going to be the last episode of this season. Christy and I talked it over, and with the summer, we've got a lot of crazy things going on. So, we're going to take a very intentional pause for the summer as we kind of focus on the business, focus on traveling with family, different things like that. And so, this episode is going to be a reflection over what we have been working on over the last 4 months, which is this podcast that we talked about at the beginning of the year and kind of kicked off. And before I go too deep into this, Christy would love to hear your thoughts about what has been going on over the last 4 months.
Yeah, it's been so fun. Honestly, I feel like we had this idea, end of last year, and I really love that we had the discipline and the execution behind it because how many times have you heard somebody say like, "Oh, I'm going to start this thing. Oh, I'm going to start doing this thing." And I think that's a testament to what we do at the optimization specialist, but even playing into the overnight success is how do things happen overnight? It's small, consistent action, right? And so over the last 4 months, being consistent, I've really enjoyed having the co-founder conversations that we have. We have great conversation, but a lot of times that camera is not on. We're not recording. Recording some of the solo episodes, admittedly, a little imposter syndrome. But I love that too because it gets me out of my own way, proves that I can do those hard things. And then last but not least, really want to highlight the um, episodes where we brought guests in. I think that's super, super powerful. And why we're taking this intentional break is because the concept of the overnight success is that we're looking at someone who has gone from zero to hero, essentially, right? And sleeping on a couch to now living in that mansion, so to speak. And whatever success looks like to whomever that might be. But we want to bring more guests in the future, and I think that's what we're going to talk about in this podcast, and of what's working, what could go better, what's gone really well. And the last thing I'll touch on here in terms of like what's gone well, and I'd love to hear more insight from you, John, is I'm a big numbers person, I'm a big data person, and when we start looking at what's going on behind this podcast, our word this year was visibility, or is visibility. And I think being intentional and saying, we're creating this podcast as a video, as audio, we're putting our best foot forward. Sure, we're not like the mass produced spending thousands or even millions on an episode, but what we are doing is we're putting our voice out there, we're creating that visibility, we're creating the consistency. And I'm excited because taking this step back almost feels like we're pulling back on that bow and arrow string so that we can launch forward even more powerfully in the fall. And because we've learned so much. So I'm going to turn it to you. I could go deeper. I could pull on some of those threads, but I'd love to hear back from you too on kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 4 months for one. I'll say that. I feel, I guess the year is going by fast if you look at it that way. And I know you and I both had different feelings on what we wanted to put into this. Was it going to work? Could we be consistent? And really, here we are 4 months later, and I think it's gone really well. I think sometimes coming up with topics was difficult, but other cases it was really easy because we were in the middle of something and it was like, hey, we're talking about this in our offline meetings. Let's just kind of click record and start putting this onto the podcast, which has been good. And I think for us, recording like the super well edited YouTube video where I have to talk at the screen and everything else, that was a little overwhelming, to your point, imposter syndrome that we felt maybe in some of those solo episodes. But these were really easy conversations to have, again, because a lot of those were already happening behind closed doors. And so I think that's been really good. It's been great to bring on the handful of guests that we have had on here. Some of those were past clients or somebody that people that we would like to work with. I think as an entrepreneur myself, I've loved the idea of entrepreneurship and just business growth and things like that. So it's been great to just have those conversations with the founder and kind of pull back the curtain and learn more. So for me, I was like, I want to have these conversations anyway. How do we have more of these conversations? Let's have a podcast so we have more of a reason to bring them on. versus say, hey, can we go get a beer and I just ask you a bunch about your business and your life. So this has been a great forum for that. I think we're definitely going to focus on that a lot more in the next season. And over these next 3 months, it's not going to just be sitting back with our feet up. It's going to be how do we come back stronger with the podcast. I about 2 months ago I put out a video on how I edit this, using the mind that we talked about from a systems perspective. Learned a lot of like how can I quickly edit these. It doesn't have to be perfect. Very similar to systems, we use Riverside, which is great. So a lot of the times, as long as we didn't have any major hiccups during the recording process, we just click export. I drop it into a couple editing programs. We use ChatGPT to generate the title and the notes and things like that. I mean, it seems a little I don't know, not selfish, but essentially we're not putting too much energy into that part of it because we didn't want to. This is not a podcast where we're planning to make money off of. This is just us having great conversations and just adding value to our audience. And so to be able to edit a podcast in less than 30 minutes has been great because this is just one more small thing to fit in throughout the week, but it provides all of that value on the back end, or I guess the front end, as far as the YouTube videos and the actual recordings that go out every Wednesday morning. So I have learned a lot about that. In the beginning, it was like, how do I edit this? All these different things, and now I can do it in my sleep almost. So I think that translates really well into systems. I don't want to go down this road because we've talked about that plenty on the podcast, but essentially have identified the way to do this repetitive process over and over, and we could very easily hand this off to a VA at some point because it's all recorded at this point and very easy to follow. So happy that we added something to our weekly responsibilities, the podcast, and it doesn't take up too much of our time. Between the recording for 30 minutes and the editing for 30 minutes, we're an hour all in and providing value to the masses. So it's been a great 4 months to learn that, and I'm sure we'll come back even stronger in the fall.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that we did have differing opinions. I was concerned when we started, like, oh no, another thing, we're trying to scale this business. And you were like, no, it's gonna be great. We're gonna create visibility. And I leaned into that word. And to your point, the 30 minutes gives us 7 YouTube shorts, 7 Instagram reels, right? It gives us some 3-minute videos. It gives us one long form content video. It gives us an opportunity to intentionally talk with people about their journey and learn more about them. It's really been a great experience. And I think learning to do those little things where it's like, oh yeah, it only takes you 30 minutes now, but up front we didn't know how long it was going to take. And I'm super grateful that you've put in the effort to really systematize it. I've recommended that video to several people who are in my circle that are saying, hey, I want to start a podcast. How do I do it? I'm like, you just do. And I'm like, and then you watch John's video because he tells you exactly how to do it. So I think it's fun where, we're flexing that muscle, so to speak. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago of how there's discipline in the gym and how that shows up in the business. And I agree with that here. Yeah, I was a little like, this is going to be hard, but in reality, it's not hard. You just have to be intentional, schedule it on the calendar, right? We create those opportunities. And I think really too, in the next season, I want to focus on bringing in more guests. And we had some phenomenal guests this season. We had Annie Walther and Hiram Skaggs and Christina Oliveras. I know we already have a couple people lined up for next season, but those people that were on this season were super impactful. They were vulnerable. They shared their journey. They helped us really create the overnight success story that I think we're looking for. And I'm excited to bring more of that into next season.
Yeah, I think the discipline piece I think really sticks out, right? Because we are busy and it's like, hey, how can we find the 30 minutes? How can we find the time to prep for the episode? Different things like that. But we weren't looking for perfection. We were looking for that consistency side, and here we are. I think this will be episode 18 once it posts, and so that's 18 episodes in a row. There's obviously people out there that have been doing it for 5 years, like good for them. But for us to put this together, looking for a way to increase our visibility and create that consistency, I think this fell in a really good spot. And I think to your point, it strengthens that discipline muscle. And so when there's other things either in our business or just in life, we've kind of strengthened that muscle so that we're ready for the next thing that is a little bit difficult and maybe not the most fun, or the different things like that. So I definitely like the consistency that we did here, and I also like the intentionality that we are looking at to take this break. We were just looking at the schedule, me traveling a couple weeks here and there, just busyness of the summers. Like, we can either stress ourselves out and maybe put out some episodes that are not our favorite, and just we just don't know when we're going to squeeze this in and stress out about it, or we can make this intentional time to focus even more on next season, focus on our clients a little bit more, enjoy the time with family and friends, and then come back. So I think that you need to understand when to make that intentional move at the same time.
Yeah, and I would double click on earlier I had mentioned the data and you just said 18 episodes. Like, that's phenomenal. And the fact that we set out with an intention at the beginning of the year, we put the numbers in our scorecard, we said we're going to track this information. We didn't do it for, oh, we want millions of likes and follows and all this stuff. We did it to add value to our audience. And I think that's where the biggest piece of this comes in, is we're super grateful for the people who are willing to spend their time listening to this and be on the podcast episodes with us, but to provide that knowledge and to share that back. And the podcast arena it's a saturated market, but when you're intentional, I think that there's a lot of power and value to be given. And that's what we want to do next season too. We can share our knowledge, but it's really neat to bring in those other people. So to your point, John, we're going to be really intentional this summer in curating that list of people we're bringing in and curating the episodes. This first season, admittedly, some of them were a little like we're building the plane as we fly. But I don't think that was a bad thing, because it taught us, hey, maybe we need to show up a little bit earlier or do this or do that. Like, right, we schedule these calls at 8 a.m. my time because we know we're busy and we need to get this done because we want to provide this value. And it really does play well into our arena of offerings for our customers, because I do think we listen to what they say too. And this is something that they're wanting. They want to hear those overnight successes. They want to hear our thoughts and our concepts on time management and discipline and leadership, right? So I'm really excited that we get to curate that next playlist, so to speak, over the summer and be really intentional, because I think our audience is going to love that.
Yeah, 100%. And one other thing I was thinking about that's great about this podcast is it did force us to get a little more clear on our message and just the things that we are focused on. I think we talked not in circles, but we definitely repeated ourselves when certain thoughts came to mind, right? And it was always hard to speak about exactly what we did. Like, we save time and energy and pieces like that. Like, okay, cool, I get it, but what else do you do? Or how can we add more value from a teaching perspective that you don't need to sit down with us and have us like review your technology, right? Because I never wanted to build a business where, sorry, I can't help you until I sit down with you, right? Like, we consult businesses, but we definitely want to make sure that the other businesses can take the information that we have, even at like just the 101 level, and take that and run with it. And so I think it's been really nice to focus on that and just create some more content that adds value without us sitting down. We obviously always want to sit down with you to look at that, because until we look deep into your systems, it's difficult to give you a whole lot of advice. But with all the different people we've sat down with, we definitely noticed some common themes there. And so to be able to take the common themes we're seeing behind the curtain and bring that to life here on the podcast has been great. And I think as our business grows, we'll have more things to talk about, but I'm kind of repeating myself here. to bringing those guests on because each guest has a unique story, and it's really fun to hear how they started, from a point of like sleeping on couches or in corporate America or just a startup job to running a business now that is supporting their entire lifestyle, which is great.
Yeah, I agree. I know I'm really excited for this next season. And to take a break. We do want to focus on our clients, and taking a break is important, I think. I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but ultimately, like, I'll just say that it's been really fun. It has been humbling too. And it's also been something it's very in your face. We said we were going to do this thing, and I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to let down our audience. I wanted to make sure I showed up for myself. Like, we're recording, and that there is a limited intimidation to be behind that. But I think ultimately doing the hard things, creating those pathways is the best way to grow. And I think that translates really well into business. From my end, I'll just say, like, I'm very excited for season 2 to come out, planning end of summer, early fall. We'll definitely let our audience know. But John, is there anything that you want to highlight, like fun moment or experience that you had in the podcast that just like really stood out to you this season?
I'm trying to think back. Like I said, it's been a blur. It's hard to believe it's already been 4 months. Um, I know there was a couple podcasts that we recorded that flowed really well. I can't think of the titles, but the ones where we didn't really have to prep too much and we just got to talk what like we'd normally talk. Those I think were some of my favorite episodes. Was no major lesson there. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of one now. You mentioned the accountability piece. Always want to make sure we have a takeaway in these episodes, and I think maybe that's a big takeaway in this episode is if you want accountability, get yourself a co-founder because you will hold each other accountable. Get yourself a good co-founder. Let me make sure I underline that. But get yourself a good co-founder because accountability is so much easier when on your bad days, like, okay, I'm having a bad day. If it's just your business, it's very easy to just take the day off or kind of give up on things. But when you have a co-founder, it is a lot harder to have that moment, and you can easily lean into that from an accountability standpoint, which is why we have the podcast that we do today, as well as other things in our business, right? Like the podcast is definitely what we're talking about now, but there's plenty of other items in our business. We create action items for ourselves throughout the week, and having each other really pushes us to make sure that as many of those get completed as possible.
Yeah, I agree. You said this, now I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, but I completely agree with you. And two things. So one, it's really easy to break promises to ourselves, right? So it's like what we do in the dark, we think nobody sees, but those consistent habits create the person that we are. And when you do have a co-founder, you can't hide from that. And the other thing I'll say is just thinking about like the VC world, the venture capitalist world. Investors do not like investing in companies that are solo founders because they know that they burn out. And so co-founders are a very powerful dynamic in the business world. And then last thing I'll say too is I touched on this in one of our other episodes talking about fitness, but I love fitness. I'll go to the gym, but those 5 a.m.s, they come real early and I don't want to go. So I hired a coach, and that accountability really changes things. And I think for us in this company, the optimization specialist is, you can build your own systems and you can build your own CRM, you can build your own tech stack, right? But sometimes when you're in the weeds, it's really hard. And the other thing is that we get a ton of people who come to us who say, I've been working on this for 6 months or a year or 2 years. And to your point, John, this last 4 months have flown by. We've had fun on the podcast, but imagine if your systems aren't being fully built out because you're busy in your business. We can come in and take that 30,000 foot perspective and help you get through the weeds and help you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sorry for all the weird analogies, but reality is it's hard to do this on your own. And finding the right people, putting them, it's that same thing. You are like the 5 people you surround yourself with, right? So finding the people in your company who can help you scale, which is what we do. We save you time, money, energy. To your point, we talk about these keywords, but like, what does that mean? We can help you take that outside perspective. And that's what I'm really excited about, because a lot of these people that come on the podcast, to your point, we've either worked with them or they're people that we could potentially work with, or we're one degree of separation away of people that we can impact their business and their lives. Because we as people are here to live life, right? But we also have this passion of supporting others. And when we look at our core values, one thing that I love is our go-giver mentality is we are here to give back to our customers. And, we celebrate accountability, which is another core value. And we do that because we're able to help you save time, money, energy. And all of that comes through this one podcast, right? Like we're looking at creating this consistency and discipline and bringing in these success stories that have been a grind. And that's why we built this whole podcast. So rant over, but I love that we can go into these little, tangenty things. You said one thing and I was like, oh, you lit this fire. Let me share this thought. And that's what this is for. And that's been one of my favorite pieces of the podcast is just getting into like the riff of a conversation and having the space to do so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, as you're bringing that energy here, that's why this podcast is so powerful, because we definitely got passionate again in our own individual syncs, and it was great. It's like, hey, let's record this a little bit more, and kind of give us almost a, not an escape, but a channel to hold on and express that passion, because we go on tangents in our meetings, and I was like, well, okay, these tangents are very great conversations that could be recorded. So that's where the podcast is. Not to say that we don't still have tangents in our meetings, but we definitely make sure that we're a little bit more intentional of where we put those and have those conversations here. And I think honestly, like, for me, this is probably a good spot to wrap up. This was more of an update than a podcast episode, but a great way to reflect on what we've done over the last 4 months, not realizing that it's already been those 4 months, right? Sometimes we are in the thick of it. As I'm editing every week, it's just like, okay, export, download, upload, change title, things like that. It's very monotonous, right? I could be moving just different items across a conveyor belt type deal, but really what's happening in that content is what's the most powerful, and that's what we get to send out to all of our audience.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. So I guess we'll just say like, stay tuned for the next season. And thank you again to the audience for tuning in, to the people who do listen to this. If you have feedback or you want to hear a certain person or you want to hear a certain topic or thought, like let us know. We're going to be planning this summer and we'll be recording some things by the end of the summer and getting the guests on and things like that. So thank you, John. And you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, no, I not much more I can add to that. I think great last 4 months. We'll be back in the fall for at least another 4 months. This time with a couple more guests and just some polishing on this as we refine and keep growing.
See
Thanks,
you
everyone.
later.